And if I take that attitude and say, I'm not going to listen to that person, I think I'm doing great, then that's a problem. But if I have the attitude, they may be right. I do have some improvement to make there. That's the kind of attitude that we all should have, and that's what Solomon says. If you listen to constructive criticism, you'll be at home among the wise. So if somebody with some wisdom brings you a little pearl, a nugget that you need to work on, then take that as a positive thing and work on that, and we'll all be better because of that. And then finally, the Proverbs 24:32.
Then I saw and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction.
Okay, so there's the eyes and the ears. He said, I looked upon it. Somebody brought something to his attention. He considered it. He looked on it, and he received instruction. He grew because of what he had learned. So God made ears and eyes for us to be used, and we use them in the proper way. Then it'll make us a better person for sure. And part of that is attuning our ears to the instruction. There is an active effort involved in learning. It's not just listening. There's an active effort involved. There's a great benefit in the attainment of wisdom. And several verses there. Let's look at Proverbs 18:15. The heart of the prudent acquires knowledge. The car of the wise seeks knowledge. That's a good one. No, the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Yeah, that's the ear of the wise seeks knowledge, and the smartest people that I know, they're always seeking knowledge. They're always trying to learn more. They're always trying to improve themselves, and Solomon certainly says that as we acquire this knowledge, let's apply it and be better people because of it, for sure. And then finally, Proverbs 19, it uses verse 8 and verse 20. Proverbs 19, verse 8 says, he who gets wisdom loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will find good. And then verse 20, listen to the counsel and receive instruction that you may be wise in your later days. So again, taking this wisdom instruction that we get along the way in life and using that and applying it, and certainly helping ourselves as we live in this life and the things that we can learn. Thoughts, comments on those?
Somebody verbally.
Right.
Did you internalize it, understand it,
okay,
and have an intentions following it?
Okay, very good, Wendell. Listening means more than just letting it go in your ear. It's, as he said, internalizing it and making a decision to do something about it, have some action that goes along with that. So thank you, very good.
That last verse talks about a little bit of the distinction between instruction and wisdom. They don't happen simultaneously. As a parent, that's comforting. I'm not sure we've got a lot of wisdom yet, but we're trying some instruction. So that wisdom, something that appears from that verse. If you get instruction, you pay attention to it. As you go along, wisdom accumulates.
Okay.
They don't necessarily happen at the same time.
Good point. Yeah, as soon as you learn something, that doesn't make you wise, but over time, using that instruction that you've got, and he talked about raising children, you're not wise the day you become a parent, but through years and trials and tribulations, you finally gain wisdom and you learn things that the knowledge wasn't enough. You need a little wisdom to go along with that. Very good. Thank you. And then part 2 talks about the value of wisdom and what's it worth. And we've dealt with this quite a bit already, a lot in Proverbs. What wisdom is worth it all. Proverbs 23:23. Okay, if you've got wisdom and you've got instruction, it says buy it and don't sell it. Don't give anything for that. It's worth a lot to you. So you can't put a value on wisdom, but it's priceless. Buy it. Do not sell it. It's certainly worth it all. Some things come at great price, and many must be had at a price. It's an odd sentence. So it's a great wisdom is as we've talked about. It's first 9 chapters in Proverbs talks about wisdom and its value. And part B there says it's an appealing commodity, whereas some important things are necessary but unpleasant. Wisdom is both precious and sweet. Proverbs 16:16. It's precious and sweet. We like those kind of things, don't we?
How much better it is to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding is to be chosen above silver.
Okay. So it says wisdom there, better than gold, and judgment better than silver. So a precious commodity for sure. And then Proverbs 24:13 and 14.
My son, eat honey, for it is good. Yes, the honey from the comb is sweet to your taste. Know that wisdom is thus for your soul. If you find it, then there will be a future, and your hope will not be cut off.
Okay, so if you find wisdom, it says it's like honey, and honeycomb, sweet to taste. When you find it, keep it, hold on to it, and your hope will not be cut off. So that's how important wisdom is. It is appealing, it is sweet, it is precious, and if we have wisdom, if we gain wisdom, it is certainly a great thing. And part C says that it's practical and useful, and it talks about through wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established, talking about that you could use that in many ways. Wisdom is the foundation of a lot of things in this life. And if we've got wisdom, then we're certainly going to have more success, I think. Anything else on part 2 there, the value of wisdom? And then part 3 talks about there's 2 paths of wisdom, and you either accept one or you deny it, and what the ramifications of that are. So Proverbs 10 and verse 17. 2 paths, Proverbs 10 and verse 17. And there's several verses like this in Proverbs that tell you the positive and then give you the negative right after it. Proverbs 10:17 is one of those. Anybody got that one?
He is on the path of life who heeds instruction, but he who forsakes reproof goes astray.
Okay, I think that's a great one. There's 2 paths. People who accept, this version said, people who accept discipline are on their pathway to life. We don't much like accepting discipline, but if we do, it says we're on the pathway to life, but those who ignore correction will go astray. So there's the 2 paths, and the wise person will accept discipline, and those who ignore it will go astray. And then Proverbs 4, and it says 10 through 19, but I don't think we need to read all that. Proverbs 4, starting in verse 10. Got which one I was looking for? Yeah, I think verse 19 is the one we were looking at. It says, the way of the wicked is like dark. Let's start at 18. I'm sorry, Proverbs 4 and verse 18. But the path of the just is like the shining sun that shines ever brighter into the perfect day. So if you're doing right and you're a righteous person, your path is bright. It's like the shining sun. Verse 19, but the way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know what makes them stumble. And we understand the difference between light and dark, and we want to be in the light. We don't want to be in the dark. And if we are doing what is right, it says just there in verse 18, then the way of the righteous is much better. It's brighter. The way of the wicked is total darkness and no idea what's going on. So, certainly two paths of life, and one is good, one is not, and Solomon points that out to us several times. But as it points out here, God says that we can't travel on both paths. You're going to be traveling on one or the other. You can't say you can't straddle the fence. A lot of us like to do that. You got to be you're on one path or the other, whether you want to be or not. You're either righteous or unrighteous, and God tells us that several times.
I think most everybody travels both of them at times.
Okay. So Wendell's question is, do you think that most of us travel both of these paths at one time or another in our lives? Yeah, I think that's true, Wendell. I think that is true. We don't always do what's right every time, do we? We make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Thankfully, God is there to forgive us if we ask for forgiveness and make the changes that are necessary. But certainly, there are two paths out there, and we can get on the wrong one at times. But thanks be to God, we can get back on the right path. Good point. Anything else on that one?
Phrase at the very end of that verse about those living in darkness don't know over what they stumble. It's very true. A lot of times, if you're not wise, if you're not paying attention, you have no idea why something failed.
Yeah.
Or why you ended up in the position that you did. But part of wisdom is not necessarily that we won't end up failing, but it's just that we are able to try to figure out what caused that and what we can improve on and how to avoid that.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Those that are walking in darkness, they end up in spots and just wonder how they got there. How did I get in this situation? And because they've been struggling in the darkness. Hopefully they'll come out of that and understand what the mistakes they made along the way. Part B there says each path radically changes our lives. Proverbs, let's look at the last one there. Proverbs 21:16. Radically changes our lives if we get on the right path. And that's the one we want to be on. That was not the perfect verse, but it is one that Proverbs 21:16 says, a man who wanders from the way of understanding will rest in the assembly of the dead. New LT version said, the person who strays from common sense will end up in the company of the dead. So that is certainly a radical pathway, one that we don't want to be on. Let's pick out a better verse. I didn't pick out a very good one there. Let's look Proverbs 13 and 14. Got one of those, this is the good thing and this is the bad thing there in Proverbs 13 and 14. Somebody want to read those?
Whoever despises the word brings destruction on himself, but he who reveres the commandment will be rewarded. Teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snare of death.
Okay, so a couple of things there. People who despise advice, this version said, are asking for trouble. And those who respect commands will succeed. I think that makes sense. And then verse 14, the instruction of the wise is like a fountain of life, like a life-giving fountain. So if you got somebody that you know is wise and they're wanting to give you instruction, then you better try to open your mouth and gather it all in. It's like a fountain of life. Those who accept it avoid the snares of life. If you want to avoid the snares of life, then use wisdom, take instruction, and Solomon says that your life is going to be radically better. Thoughts, comments on that one? And then the last one there, each path has its own destination and consequences. So again, two choices, choice that we make regarding righteousness or unrighteousness, Proverbs 11 and verse 8. Proverbs 11 and verse 8 It says, the righteous is delivered from trouble, and it comes to the wicked instead. And so the righteous is delivered from his trouble, but it comes to the wicked instead. And then verse 19, that same chapter says, as the righteousness leads to life, so he who pursues evil pursues it to his own death. And we certainly see that. Those who do evil and those who practice evil sometimes end up in some bad situations and leads to their own demise. So certainly not a good thing. Each path has its own destination and has its own consequences. So, any thoughts, comments on those first part of this lesson? So, part 4 talks about the fear of the Lord, and somehow I got to chasing rabbits on this one. So, what is the fear of the Lord? How would you describe the fear of the Lord? Respect, okay, certainly. Reverence. Fear of the Lord, when you say, and this is used, I think I said 40 times in the Bible. The fear of the Lord is this, the fear of the Lord is that. So it made me think, well, what really is the fear of the Lord? What are we talking about here? So we got reverence and respect. What else?
Honor for his place as authority and supreme and sovereign, and our place as recipients of his instruction.
Really good. Make me say that again. Honor for his place. So we're giving honor. Fear of the Lord is honor for his place in sovereignty and in creation and all that he's done for us. And then what was the last part?
Honoring our own place as recipients of his instruction.
Okay, and honoring our own place as recipients of his instruction. If we listen to what he has given us, then we have this honor for him, and that is a fear of the Lord. That is another definition of the fear of the Lord. So that's very good. What else? When you say I've got the fear of the Lord, what does that mean to me? I'll tell you what Webster says about it.
Putting him first
Okay?
in your life,
Okay?
not your own desires most of the time.
Okay, putting him first. Certainly, that's a good one.
More of an example than it is
Yep.
definition.
Because we fear the Lord, we should want to be wise, as Solomon's talk about, and live according to God's precepts. Webster says, for the word for fear is unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. So if you got a fear for something, you got an unpleasant, when we're scared of something, unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. So if somebody says there's a tornado coming through Pulaski County, we all have that fear, don't we? We have a fear. It's a strong emotion caused by an anticipation of an awareness of a danger. It causes us to be anxious and concerned for sure. So that's one part of Webster's definition. And the other one is the one that I think is more appropriate for what Solomon's telling us, a profound reverence and awe, especially toward God, our Creator. So if you got a fear of the Lord, you got a profound reverence and awe, especially toward God, our Creator. And so I think that is certainly, so that got me. So what is, when we're I guess throughout life, we've got to, so tell me about, so I think of fear as being positive and negative, and I think it's probably good in both ways. So what's the negative, when we think fear of the Lord, what's the negative connotation there that we all have? Okay, when we get to judgment. We know there's a judgment day coming, and we know if we're not found righteous in God's eyes, that we're going to be condemned. So hell is certainly a fear. We all have a fear of hell, and I think that's a real thing, and that is a real concern. If our only reason for being a Christian is a fear of hell, what do you think about that? Okay, we're missing the mark. If that's the only reason, and it is a reason, so we can't wipe it away and say that's not a true fact. But if our only reason for trying to be a Christian is the fear of hell, then I think we certainly have missed the meaning of what the fear of the Lord is. Thoughts, comments on that one?
Part of that first definition, I think you said the more negative ones are like an awareness. So it, perfect love casts out fear. So if we're saved, we don't need to be afraid necessarily, shaking in fear, afraid to do things, afraid we're going to make mistakes, but we do need to be aware.
Okay.
Aware, like when I'm thinking about when God was giving instructions to the Israelites in Deuteronomy and saying, if you go into this land and you honor me and you put me first and you don't worship idols, I'm going to bless you with all these things. But if you go in there and you don't wipe the people out and you turn away from me, this is going to be your consequences. And so he's the same God either way.
Right.
If they had done right, they wouldn't need to be afraid of the curses that he promised them if they did wrong, but they would need to be aware to keep them from going on that wrong path.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Yeah. So the fear we can and there's many verses. A couple of them here, if you want to jot these down. Job 28:28. Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. So if you got this fear of the Lord, it's wisdom. So we need this fear. Psalms 1:11 and 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So there's that fear of the Lord. What is it? How do we get it? Then Proverbs 1 and verse 7. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. We looked at that one before. So the fear of the Lord is certainly a real thing. Yes, ma'am.
Before you become a Christian, what spurs you, I always think of the fear of the Lord spurs you to action. That fear of hell gets you moving to be baptized.
Okay.
And then as you grow in wisdom, that fear of the Lord, you learn that it's more love and honor and respect for
Yeah.
the Lord. So over time, you come to realize that it's not about hell, it's about getting to heaven to be there with God.
Okay. That's great. That was great. If you didn't hear that, her comment was, in the beginning, as you're making your first steps toward becoming a Christian, maybe the fear of hell is the reason. Maybe that is the action that spurs you to baptism. But as we mature and get older, we understand that the fear of the Lord is more about love and respect and awe of what we have in God and how good He is to us and how well, if we follow Him, how well we are treated and all the things all the graces that we have because we have this fear of God in our lives. So very good comments. One of the people that I was looking at about this says when he's talking about the fear of the Lord, the first thing that came in his mind anyway was the awe, A-W-E, the awe that we have of God. And despite our overuse and therefore watering down of the term, awe is perhaps the best description of the fear of the Lord. Awe beyond belief. And Psalms 33, verses 6 through 9, if you want to turn there, some great verses that talk about combining this awe and fear. Psalms 33, verses 6 through 9. Somebody want to read that for us? So I think those are fabulous verses that talk about what I'm trying to say here. Verse 8, let all the earth fear the Lord. So is that a dread? Is that No, he's talking about the beauty of it, the creation, and how God's in control of everything. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. Fear the Lord, stand in awe of him. Verse 9, for he spoke it and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. So I think that awe is a great thing to think about. And when you think about fearing the Lord, you're just in awe of him. He spoke it and it was done. And because he spoke it and it was done, on the other hand, he can speak it and it can be undone. So, this may be our last day on this earth. God can declare that if he chooses to do that. So the awe and the reverence that we should have for God because of who he is and what he created. He spoke this world into existence. Man, that's some good stuff. So if we have that awe, then certainly that is a good thing. The next thing that this fellow points out is certainly if you're rebellious, if you're doing things that are not right, you're not trying to follow God in any way, then it is a dread. The fear of the Lord for that person is a dread. For Christians, it should not be that way. The Christian shouldn't have the fear. It should not be a dread. It should be a delight. And there are verses that certainly point that out both ways. Look at Nehemiah. Sorry, I got down this rabbit hole. I just couldn't get off of it. Nehemiah chapter 1 and verse 11. Fear of the Lord is a delight. Something that scares you don't think it's being delightful. But this is Nehemiah's prayer when he heard about, remember the state of the walls in Jerusalem and how bad it was. And in verse 11, he said, O Lord, I pray, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name. And let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. So Nehemiah says, your servants who desire to fear your name. So it's a delight, a desire, something that you want, to have this fear of God and for all that he is and for what he has done for us. So I think that's, as a rebellious person, then yeah, you got that dread. You should have that dread. You should have that fear. But as a child of God, then it should be more of a delight than a fear. Another passage that he brought out here was Joshua chapter 4. And Joshua talks about this a lot. Joshua chapter 4. Verses 19 through 24. Somebody want to read those? Joshua chapter 4, verses 19 through 24. Joshua and his fear for the Lord and making an application of that.
People came up out of Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. Those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal, and he said to the people of Israel, your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? You shall let your children know. Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. The Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you passed over. The Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over. So that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever.
So there's that good comment that he's telling the children of Israel that you may fear the Lord your God forever. And why was this fear? What was the point he made? He said his children are going to ask, what's these 12 stones? And you give them the story, how we crossed the Red Sea, how we crossed over the Jordan, how that, we have been blessed. And in doing that, you're telling them, this is the fear of God. This is the fear of the Lord because of all that he has done for us. So that's another reason, certainly, that as children of God, we should delight in him, in the fear of the Lord, because of all that he has done for us. And this writer makes an interesting point. I thought it was very interesting. So, would we expect God to talk about the same time of judgment on Israel to be the basis of their fear. Now think about what this means. When our children today, when our children see us eat the bread, drink the cup, ask what it means, we need to let our children know our God delivered us. So this is what we should tell them. I think this was great. Our God delivered us from our sins by sending his son Jesus to die on the cross for us. He struck down the power of sin, destroyed the power of death, and was resurrected so that we can be resurrected. This was so that everyone will know the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So took that same thought that Joshua had, applied it to us today. You know, when our children ask, why do we do this? Why do we partake of the Lord's Supper? Well, because Christ died for us. And because of that, as Joshua told the children of Israel, we should have the fear of the Lord. We should have the awe. We should have the awesomeness. We should have the delight. And none of the dread should be there in this fear of the Lord thing, fear of the Lord comment. Thoughts? I thought that was really good. Thoughts, comments on that? Okay.
Christian dad, you teach them about that, and that's the beginning of them learning respect, learning to be in awe of something.
Yeah, great point, great point. Thomas's point there, if you didn't hear him, was as Christian dads, our children are in awe of us, hopefully, and they want to respect us and honor us, and his point was later in life that they understand that there's more to that than just than just the respect part. They learned about our life, and they learned why we're Christians, and they learn why we're living our lives the way we're living them, and then they have that fear of the Lord that I think that we're talking about here this morning. So I think it's very, very good. Thanks, Thomas. Yes, sir.
I always think when you don't want to do something, always you still do it because you make a choice for God. But if that's all if we're constantly just having to get ourselves to make a choice and drag ourselves to make a choice, yeah, we're still doing it, we're still making that effort because we made a choice. But I'm starting to think I really got to be self-reflective. Why do I keep having to make so many choices whenever instead of I pray 3 or 4, 5 times a day, and I have to just constantly say, I'm going to pray. I will make my choice. Now, I shouldn't have to just keep making a choice like that. God should be bringing me to my knees.
Okay.
By that fear.
Yeah, great.
It should propel me to action, not I keep having to just drag myself to a choice.
Yeah, great point. Great point. The fear of the Lord. We sing that song, "I Stand in Awe of You," and this I read too many commentaries. This one writer said, that really doesn't mean that we stand when we sing that song. It just means that we see the awesomeness of God, and we're in his presence. And in reality, we should be on our knees. We shouldn't be standing in awe of God. Everybody that came in the presence of God, what happened to them? They were terrified. They went to their knees. So when we think we're beating our chest and I'm standing in the awe of God, no, you got it wrong. If you're standing in the awe of God, you're actually on your knees and grateful and thankful for all that God has given us. And to Ron's point, if we're really got the fear of God, and we know about his love, and we know about the confidence we have because of who he is and the creation that he's given us, then the choices that we make should be easier. We shouldn't be having to prod ourselves along to do the right thing. It should just become natural for us, hopefully.
And I think about what you just said. What Hebrews says, what was Moses' emotion as he stood at Mount Sinai? It said he was terrified. And I don't think it was because he was afraid he was getting ready to get struck dead. It wasn't like a physical fear. It was I comprehend how big God is. And the same thing Isaiah, when he came to the presence of God, all those wasn't a physical fear of death or a fear of punishment. It was a comprehension of how big God is, and that distance between us and God is a reverence and an awe. Like that's what that brings to mind.
Yeah, so great point. Very, very good. Thank you. So let's look at Acts 9 and 31. That's a good place to jump off on this. I'm afraid I'm not going to get to the questions. Sorry. Acts 9 and verse 31. We got a bunch of people that were fearing the Lord, and what a positive thing that was. So we just see just before this, Saul has been converted, and Barnabas has vouched for him, and now he's working hard for the Lord there it was in Jerusalem, and then they send him on to Caesarea and then to Tarsus. But verse 31 says, then the churches throughout all Judea, Galilee, and Samaria had peace and were edified, and walking in the fear of the Lord and in the comfort of the Holy Spirit, they were multiplied. So walking in the fear of the Lord was certainly a positive thing. I'm in awe of God. I'm in awe of what he's done. I'm in awe of this guy that was persecuting Christians, and now he's a great ambassador for Christ. And so the churches grew because they had the fear of the Lord. So the fear of the Lord was there, and the churches grew. So I thought that was a great verse to remember. And then 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 11. 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 11. Talking about the fear of the Lord. And 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10 and 11. Somebody want to read those for us?
We must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Therefore, knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade men, but we are made manifest to God. And I hope that we are made manifest also in your conscience.
Okay, so there's that fear of the Lord again, knowing we will stand before judgment, we will be judged, and consequences of how this fear of the Lord, what it caused us to do while we lived here, if we were righteous and trying to obey God, or whether we abandoned God and tried to follow men, that there will be a judgment coming, and that fear is a real thing, and it's something that we should all certainly be concerned about. But that's the small part of it. I think when I think of some of the things, the love of God and the comfort and confidence that we get because we're walking in this fear, and how much better our lives are if we've got the fear of the Lord with us. And so thoughts, comments on that before we run out of time here?
I just have in Acts 9:31, where we read the fear and comfort. We fear the Lord and we walk in his ways, we can be comforted. Like, there's just one of two paths, like it said before. And if we're on the Lord's side and we're walking in his path, there's so much, people think of it as stifling, as, I can't do all these things because I'm walking with the Lord, but in truth, that brings freedom. Because there's a lot of choices we won't have to make, and a lot of consequences we won't have to suffer if we're walking in fear.
Okay, great point. Lots of choices we won't have to make, lots of consequences we won't have to suffer if we're truly walking in the fear of the Lord. There's lots of bad things out there, and if we're following God and walking in the fear of him with the reverence and awe that we should, I think that's certainly good. So when we think of the fear of the Lord, I think the word that comes in our head is awesome. It's just awesome. And we use that word, or I do, too much for things that are not really that cool. But from now on, I'm only going to use that word as much as I can just for God and the fear of him. Very good. Thank you all. So Wednesday, we'll finish this up with a greater than Solomon is here.